Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Bari S. Robinson. And we're going to be discussing her amazing book, An American Daughter of Brown. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. But people, listen, if you want to gather everything that Bari has in store, well, you got to go to her personal site, okay? It truly is a one-stop shop for everything that she has to offer. Now, when you head on over to BariRobinsonAuthor.com, not only are you going to find more information on Bari herself, you're going to find more information on this fantastic book, An American Daughter of Brown, but you're also going to find another book that she's created as well, and that one's called Cuba's Guarded Promise, a snapshot of a country on the cusp of enormous change. Both of which are available for purchase through this site. Head on over there and make sure you take advantage of everything that she has. Once again, that's BariRobinsonAuthor.com. And I will say, Bari was brought to our network, People of Distinction, by some of the best publishers in the business, Author Reputation Press. So if you or anyone you know have a book that they'd like moved, I'm telling you, people, contact ARP and have them move it for you. You can find out more information on their fantastic team at authorreputationpress.com. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Bari here on the line. So let's bring her here with us. Bari, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you, Benji, and I'm really happy to be here.
Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours, Bari. We're really looking forward to this. And my listening audience knows, I've mentioned this so many times in the past, I would always consider myself a history buff. I love history. I love learning about it. And it's really something that's so humbling about, learning about humanity before I was presented with this world. But listen, at the end of the day, I am all for this. And being a black man myself, this is right up my alley. I love this. So we have so much to learn from you today within this short interview, but also when we run and pick up copies of the book. So people, what I want you to do is sit back, strap in, have your notebooks ready, because Bari's going to take us back to the classroom, okay? And Bari, before we jump into your book, let's start off with learning a little bit more about your background. So please tell our listening audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, Benji, I grew up in the Midwest, specifically in Kansas City, Missouri, where the facts of this novel take place. And that's about 60 miles away from Topeka, Kansas, which is the seat of the decision Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Mm-hmm. I also came from a family of educators. Being an author is my third career. My first career was was as a teacher, and I taught French, Spanish, and English on the high school and community college level. And I also studied abroad, both at the University of Paris and the University of Barcelona. I grew up during the civil rights era. And my family of teachers and their friends were very impacted by the Brown decision, which was decided on May 17th, 1954. I heard, and also I wanted to note that decision will have its 70th anniversary in 2024. So this is very timely. I heard family members, including my parents, aunts, and uncles, talking about the impact of that decision and what impact it may have on the Negro, which was what we in the world called black people at that time. Mm-hmm. And I grew up near Topeka, Kansas, as I said, and experienced segregation and integration, and wanted to write about some of the issues facing teachers and students in the public schools during that period. While I was teaching in community college in Salinas, California, some of my students were farm workers who would sometimes miss class because of demonstrations led by Cesar Chavez. He would often come to that college for rallies, and I was very inspired by him and how he organized that movement. Another experience that really impacted me and the writing of An American Daughter of Brown was my experience teaching at Soledad Prison in the Salinas Valley. The president of the college where I was teaching came up to me in the hall one day and said, "Bari, have I got an assignment for you?" And I kind of gave him the side eye. And he looked at me and said, "How would you like to teach at Soledad Prison?" Well, that seemed to come out of left field. And I said, "Well, will I be safe?" And he said, "Oh, of course. They have guards all over the place. And you will be teaching model prisoners who are about to leave prison and re-enter the world. And you'll be teaching English, composition, and grammar." And I said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. Count me in." So I started the program. I walked into the prison, and you can imagine how I felt, and you've probably seen it on TV when those doors slam behind you. Mm-hmm. When I was walking into the corridor. And I first looked around for guards, and there was one sitting at a desk way down the corridor alone, reading something. And then I found the classroom, and I was 27 years old at the time. And so when I walked in, there was a lot of chatter from the 35 students that were in there. I didn't see a guard anywhere. And so they started making cat calls and whatever. And then this big burly inmate stood up and said, "Shut up. You're not going to mess this up for me. I need to learn what she is going to teach." And then there was a silence. And so from there on, I had no problems. It was impactful for me because when I would give assignments, I learned that they were highly intelligent people. There were problems with grammar, and I corrected them. But if I gave a 3-page or 4-page essay as an assignment, I'd get 10 or 15 pages back. So I was the hardest working teacher that I had ever been. And the stories that they were telling about their lives prior to prison and while they were there were fascinating in and of themselves. But then as we got to know one another better, they started asking me questions about their own families. I have children, and the courts are trying to take them away. How can I get them back? My mother is ill, and I don't know how to get her into a nursing home. And what should I do? Well, I had very strict rules and guidelines with respect to what kinds of conversations I could enter into with them. I was supposed to be a teacher, and that was it. Plus, I didn't even know the answers at that time. I had been in this rarefied academic environment all my career. But they really made me start to question things, and actually were the last catalyst I had to go to law school. So I started, after the second semester of teaching there, I started the application process for law school. And my goal was to, I lived in Monterey, California, which is God's country, I think. but I wanted to teach close to the school so that I would have an income. And the president of the school was a little bit dejected when I told him I wanted to leave and go to law school, but then he said, "You'd really be good." And he says, "So where are you applying?" He said, "Where are you applying?" And I told him, Monterey School of Law, which is a good school, but it was not accredited. And then he said, "Oh, no, it really matters where you go to law school." So he got me to apply to Berkeley. And I said, "Well, that deadline is 2 weeks away." He said, "You take off until you get that application in." And I did. I got in, and the rest is history. While at Berkeley, actually 2 years ahead of me was Fania Davis, Angela's sister. There were a lot of things going on at that time. Berkeley is a very activist school. And so, I learned about activism. I came out of my rarefied existence, but I loved academic or the teaching aspect of learning. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoyed law school. A lot of people say that they love the law, but they don't like law school. I loved law school. And I was invited to be on the California Law Review, which is a publication entity for the law school, and they analyze cases that impact the country, and they also write articles regarding cases and trends in the law. I wrote an article on diversity in media ownership, both print and broadcast. And the process was very strict. I had very strict confines about how that article had to be written. But I did, and as a result, I got a clerkship with the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., which is the same court that Ketanji Brown Jackson just left, or Justice Jackson, mm-hmm. to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it was really, really revelatory. My judge was the Honorable Harry Edwards, who eventually became the chief judge of that court. And I met, in the lunchroom, I met Sandra Day O'Connor. Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually came onto that court while I was there. In the chambers next to mine, or next to Judge Edwards, was Robert Bork. And so, all of a sudden, I felt like history was marching past me. And it was quite a learning experience. And then when I left my clerkship, I came back to California and worked in a large law firm, practicing antitrust law, and then a smaller law firm practicing real estate and construction law. I loved real estate and construction law, and you may know that in California, real estate is really a big deal, of course, especially with the prices. And so, it was a learning experience. I learned how to get out of my cocoon and argue cases, and then eventually I was able to be a pro tem judge, which means a substitute judge in juvenile court. So I had a view of problems that were facing people of color and people who came into unfortunate circumstances and might have lost their children through the system. And so, then eventually I went back to my childhood dream of writing. And I was able to put more time into it because my child was growing up and didn't require so much care. And I was married, but, we were very scheduled at the time. And it was quite an experience learning this profession, how to write. And my first book was about Cuba, and I wrote it, Cuba's Guarded Promise, because the Obama administration had opened up Cuba, and there was a lot of trade now, or at that time, that was going on. And so I went to visit and visited things like nursing homes, schools. I talked to professors at the University of Havana, and I had the opportunity to go to the place where Ernest Hemingway lived, Finca Vigia. And you can't go inside the house, but all of the furnishings are there just as he left them. And it was fascinating. I also saw where he wrote The Old Man and the Sea. I went to that town.
Oh, wow.
And he has always been someone who inspired me, along with Alice Walker and Toni Morrison, Langston Hughes, all of the black writers. Langston Hughes has a connection to my family just because my father, who also graduated from the University of Kansas undergraduate, like I did, stayed in the same house. The same woman rented him a room, and it was the same room where Langston Hughes stayed when he was a student there. Mm-hmm. Because at the time my father was going to school, black people could not live in the dorms. And so, this is a circuitous answer to your question, but that's how I got here.
There you have it. People, I'm telling you, so much to be gained here. Bari, who would you say is your intended audience with this book, and what is one of the main messages that you hope that they receive from it?
The intended audience is the public at large, as well as this younger generation. I want them to be able to look at the contents and the events that are described in the book and compare them to what's going on today and ask themselves, how far have we really come? And, another thing that I wanted to tell my audience is that at the time of Brown, everybody just assumes that African Americans or black people or Negroes, whatever they were called then, all came from rural environments and were very poor, and or they lived in the cities in tenement housing, and that was true for a lot of people. But there was a segment of the black society that was middle class. And I wanted to show what middle class meant to black people at that time. And now you see black people that are forging ahead and have achieved a lot of financial success, and are living very, very well. At the time, we were just coming out of a really dark period. that lasted until the Second World War. And then when the soldiers came home, they began to be able to acquire cars and homes and things like that. And I was fortunate enough to come from a family like that. But even though families might have been middle class or more like lower middle class, that economic stability was rather tenuous because of the racism. And because, if the country was experiencing economic hardship, the old saying, when the population at large gets the cold, Black people get pneumonia. So they're kicked out of that middle class. They lose that status and security. So I wanted to show that, and I also wanted to show the fact that, as Langston Hughes once said, or questioned, what happens to a dream deferred? In my book, one of the high schools that the protagonist, Lauren Sullivan, attended later after the Brown decision was high school that the Brown decision had not had an effect on quite yet. It was still all Black. The teachers were, most of them had master's degrees, and there were a few that had PhDs. They came from HBCUs or all Black colleges, and they were highly intelligent and very dedicated to their students. And this dedication and teaching went back to slavery when, the phrase was, each one teach one. And that means, if you have a certain knowledge, and of course reading was forbidden in slavery, but if you got to learn to read, you teach that to somebody else. And the more skills you have, you teach one or more people. And these people had the ability, the faculty had the ability to do whatever they so chose, but those choices were very narrow. And so this dream deferred issue that I talked about was that they had to defer their own dreams, but in order to feel a sense of satisfaction, they dedicated themselves to the next generation. And that's what I experienced personally. And so, those are some of the themes that I wanted to bring out in the book.
Bari, as we start to close out of this fantastic interview, listen, we have discussed so much information, and people, we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the heart of it yet. But Bari, since we still have you here on the line, is there anything else that we haven't yet touched up on that you really want to let us know?
Okay, yeah, I do want to talk about the character just a bit. The book starts in the wake of Brown, and she is entering the third grade. It follows her through undergraduate school and her study abroad in Paris, and where she meets a young man at the Sorbonne, where she's studying, who takes her to visit his family in the provinces in Brittany, in France. And she finds a kinship with the mother who was raped during the Second World War by German soldiers. And it allows Lauren to fully process her own near-rape situation and find a kinship with French people. I don't want to say any more because there is a lot to read, and I want the public to read it and fill in the blanks themselves. What would I tell a new aspiring writer? I would like to tell a new writer to pull from your own experiences, and don't limit yourself, or don't tell yourself that you haven't had that many, because even if you don't go horizontally in the breadth of experiences, you can go deep. And everybody, if you have lived, you have something to write about. And so do that. And also know that, if you have honed in on this craft, you can help others.
Mm-hmm. There you have it. People, I'm telling you, this is a movement, okay? It's so much bigger than a book. The journey is one to get lost in, but the lessons are one to take for a lifetime. I'm telling you, you know where you have to go. I'm going to say it again just to re-impress it for you. We're here on the line with Bari S. Robinson. We just finished discussing her amazing book, An American Daughter of Brown. It's available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, but check out her personal site, BarryRobinsonAuthor.com. Pick up copies of this book, but also pick up copies of her other book, Cuba's Guarded Promise. You surely will not be disappointed with either one of them. A valuable, valuable book to add to your shelf, an even better gift to add to someone else's. So you know where to go. Bari, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Well, thank you. I thought it was great. I had a great time.